I'm Laura, 33, and I never thought my own family would betray me so completely. My carefully built financial stability came crashing down when I checked my account during lunch and saw it $56,000 charged to my premium credit card. The purchases, first-class flights to Paris, luxury hotels and shopping sprees. The culprits, my parents and sister Natalie. My stomach dropped as realization hit. They had stolen my card information and were living it up in Paris at my expense. Before I tell you what happened. Next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. If you've ever had family take advantage of your generosity, trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. My life in Boston had been carefully constructed through years of hard work and discipline as a senior financial analyst at Meridian Consulting. I'd recently received a promotion after 5 years of dedicated service. The promotion came with several executive benefits, including a premium credit card with an impressively high limit. I remember feeling proud when it arrived in the mail, seeing it as recognition of my financial responsibility and career success. My apartment in the Back Bay area wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. I'd saved for years to make the down payment, carefully budgeting every expense while my peers splurged on vacations and designer clothes. Financial security meant everything to me, perhaps because I'd grown up watching my parents struggle. Linda and Richard. My parents were both public school teachers in our small Connecticut hometown. They lived paycheck to paycheck, sometimes taking on summer jobs to make ends meet. I learned early on that money was tight, so I never asked for extras. When college application time came around, I applied for every scholarship possible and worked part-time throughout my undergraduate years at Boston University, between scholarships, loans, and my jobs, waiting tables, and tutoring. I managed to cover my education costs with minimal help from my parents. My sister, Natalie, had a very different experience. 3 years younger than me. She was always the family favorite, where I was practical and studious. Natalie was creative and spontaneous. My parents called her their free spirit, which somehow translated to fewer responsibilities and more indulgences. When Natalie decided to attend Syracuse University to study communications, my parents suddenly found the money to cover her tuition. They took out a second mortgage on their house, something they had refused to do. For me, Natalie isn't as academically gifted as you, my mother explained when I questioned the disparity. She needs more support. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Meridian and began climbing the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, Natalie bounced between jobs, eventually settling into what she called a career as a lifestyle influencer in reality. This meant posting sporadically on Instagram and YouTube, never earning enough to support herself fully. She moved back home with our parents at 25, ostensibly, to build her brand. But 4 years later, she was still there, still financially dependent throughout the years. I'd become the family bank when my father needed dental work not covered by insurance. I paid the $3,000 bill when Natalie's car broke down. I covered the $2,500 repair when my parents' roof leaked. I contributed $5,000 toward fixing it. These loans were rarely acknowledged and never repaid. Each time I told myself it would be different, that they would appreciate my sacrifice. But the pattern continued. 2 weeks before the Paris incident, we had gathered for our monthly family dinner at my parents' house. Natalie was unusually subdued, picking at her food while my mother fussed over her. Brandon broke up with her, my mother whispered when Natalie left the table. She's devastated. Brandon was Natalie's latest boyfriend, a marketing executive she'd been dating for 6 months. I hadn't met him, but had heard plenty about their glamorous dates and weekend getaways. When Natalie returned, she sighed dramatically. I've always dreamed of going to Paris. It would be perfect to heal my broken heart. My father patted her hand. Someday, sweetie. The conversation shifted to my recent promotion. I mentioned the upcoming business trip to London, scheduled for the following month, including the new corporate card I'd received. What kind of benefits does it have? My father asked, seemingly casual. Travel insurance, concierge service? No foreign transaction fees? I replied, it's mainly for business expenses. Do you have to pay it yourself first and get reimbursed? My mother inquired, looking back. These questions should have raised red flags, but years of conditioning had taught me to dismiss my suspicions where family was concerned. I even showed them this sleek metal card when my father asked to see it, completely unaware of what would follow. Throughout my adult life, I'd struggled with my family's dynamics. Despite my financial success, I still craved their approval. Perhaps that's why I continued to help them financially, hoping that generosity would eventually buy their respect. Deep down, I knew this wasn't healthy, but breaking. Free from childhood patterns is harder than any spreadsheet analysis or market projection I'd ever tackled at work. My friend Rebecca had pointed this out during our last coffee date. "Laura, you're still trying to earn their love," she observed, "but you deserve it unconditionally." I'd brushed off her concern, changing the subject to her recent engagement. It was easier to focus on other people's lives than to examine the painful truth of my own family situation. I took pride in being the responsible one. The successful one, even as resentment simmered beneath the surface. After all, responsibility was my identity, the quality that defined me. But what happens when the people who should appreciate your responsibility exploit it instead? I was about to find out. Monday started like any other day. I woke at 5:30 a.m. and went for my usual run along the Charles River and arrived at the office by 7:45. I had an important presentation scheduled for that afternoon, so I spent the morning polishing my slides and reviewing the market analysis I'd prepared for a client, a healthcare startup, looking to expand internationally. At noon, I stepped out to grab a sandwich from the deli across the street while waiting in line. I pulled out my phone to check emails. That's when I noticed several notifications from my credit card company. At first, I assumed they were routine alerts about the statement closing date or rewards points. But when I saw fraud alert in the subject line of multiple messages, my heart began to race. Abandoning my place in line, I stepped outside to call the credit card company immediately after verifying my identity. The representative's tone became sympathetic. "Miss Thompson, we've detected unusual activity on your account over the past 48 hours. There have been several large charges made in Paris, France. Since these don't align with your typical spending patterns, our system flagged them for review." "Paris?" I repeated. Confused. "I haven't authorized any charges in Paris. What exactly are we talking about?" The representative began listing the transactions, each one landing like a physical blow. 3 first-class tickets on Air France from New York to Paris, $8,500, 4 nights at the Hotel Plaza. Anthony, $12,000 shopping charges at Chanel, $5,800. Louis Vuitton on the Champlain, $7,200 dinner at Lamroy, $1,400. The list continued, reaching a staggering total of $56,000, and climbing. These charges were made under what names I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The hotel reservation is under Richard Thompson, and the flight tickets were purchased for Richard, Linda, and Natalie Thompson, my parents and sister. The realization hit me with such force that I had to lean against the building for support. While I was preparing for my presentation, they were using my credit card to fund a luxury Parisian vacation. "I need to dispute these charges," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "These were made without my authorization." Still on the phone with a credit card representative, I opened Instagram and searched for Natalie's profile. Sure enough, her most recent story showed her toasting with champagne at the Eiffel Tower, our parents smiling beside her. The next image displayed shopping bags from Chanel and Louis Vuitton arranged artfully on a hotel bed. The caption read, "Best surprise ever. Mom and Dad are the greatest." My hands shook as I scrolled through more posts. They had arrived in Paris the previous day and were clearly enjoying every extravagant moment at my expense. The credit card representative continued speaking, explaining the dispute process and investigation timeline, but her words became background noise as I struggled to process the betrayal after ending the call. I stood frozen outside the deli, unable to move. Nausea swept over me in waves, and my vision narrowed to a pinpoint I'd experienced. Anxiety attacks before, but nothing like this overwhelming sense of violation. Somehow I made it back to the office, but focusing on work became impossible during our team meeting. My boss noticed my distraction. "Laura, are you all right? You seem off today." "I'm not feeling well," I managed to reply. "Would it be possible for someone else to handle the presentation this afternoon?" Concern flashed across her face. In 5 years, I had never asked to be relieved of a responsibility. She nodded, instructing my colleague Devin to take over, and suggested I go home early. The drive to my apartment passed in a blur. Once inside, I collapsed onto my couch, phone in hand, and began calling my parents. No answer. I tried Natalie, straight to voicemail. I sent text messages to all 3, asking them to contact me immediately about an urgent financial matter. An hour later, my mother finally responded, "We'll talk later. Enjoying special family time." Special family time. The phrase ignited fresh anger. For years, I'd been excluded from many family activities because I was too busy with work or wouldn't enjoy it anyway. Now they were having special family time, funded by my credit card, without my knowledge or consent. Natalie's response came next. "Don't be dramatic. It's just money, you make plenty of it anyway." Just money. My money. Money I'd earned through years of hard work and careful planning. Money that represented security, independence, and future opportunities to them. It was just money. Because it wasn't theirs, I spent the evening alone in my apartment, alternating between rage and disbelief. How had they obtained my card information? Then, I remembered showing my father the card at dinner. He must have memorized or photographed the details when I wasn't looking. The premeditation made the betrayal even worse. As I scrolled through more of Natalie's social media posts, the full extent of their extravagance became clear. While I ate a microwave dinner alone in my apartment, they were dining at Michelin-starred restaurants. While I worried about my presentation, they were shopping at designer boutiques. The disparity was staggering. The injustice raw that night. Sleep eluded me every time I closed my eyes. I saw those Instagram photos, my family smiling and celebrating their Paris adventure at my expense. By morning, their betrayal had crystallized into a cold, hard reality that demanded action. Tuesday morning brought no relief. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the morning trying again to reach my family. When they continued to ignore my calls, I left a detailed voicemail for my father. Dad, this is Laura. I need you to call me back immediately. My credit card company has alerted me to over $56,000 in unauthorized charges in Paris. Under your names. This is credit card fraud, which is a criminal offense. Please call me by the end of the day, so we can discuss how to handle this situation. I followed this with an email to all three of them, itemizing every charge that had appeared on my account and explaining the serious financial impact these unauthorized expenses would have on my life. I set a clear deadline: respond by 5 p.m. Eastern Time, or I would have no choice but to escalate the situation. At noon, I met my friend Jasmine for lunch as a bank manager. She had experience with fraud cases and could offer both professional advice and personal support. Laura, this is serious, she said after hearing the full story. What they've done is illegal, regardless of your family relationship. I know, I replied, pushing my untouched salad around the plate, but the thought of my parents facing legal consequences. Jasmine reached across the table to squeeze my hand. That's exactly what they're counting on. They knew you wouldn't press charges because they're family. They're exploiting your love and loyalty. Her words stung because they were true. My family had calculated that I would ultimately forgive them, as I always had before the realization strengthened my resolve to hold them accountable. This time, by Tuesday evening, the deadline had passed with no substantive response. Then, just as I was preparing for bed, my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. Finally, I answered. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. What's this about, fraud? He demanded, his tone more annoyed than concerned. We're trying to enjoy our vacation. The vacation you charged to my credit card without my permission, over $56,000 worth of charges. Oh, that he sounded dismissive. Natalie needed this trip after her breakup. You know how sensitive she is, and that justifies stealing from me. We didn't steal anything, he countered. We're family. We'll pay you back. Eventually, when you can... Dad, this isn't a small loan. It's $56,000. You make 6 figures. Laura, this won't hurt you. Like it would us. We've never had a vacation like this. The conversation continued in this vein with my father, minimizing their actions and my concerns. When I mentioned potential legal implications, he scoffed. You wouldn't report your own parents to the police? Don't be ridiculous. After disconnecting, I sat in stunned silence. Not once had he apologized. Not once had he acknowledged the breach of trust. Instead, he had treated me as unreasonable for being upset about their theft. Wednesday brought a call from my mother, her approach different but equally manipulative. Laura, sweetie, I know you're upset. She began, her voice gentle, but try to understand our position after all. We've sacrificed for you. Growing up, what sacrifices, Mom? I put myself through college. I've been financially independent since graduation. Meanwhile, you've paid for everything for Natalie. That's not fair, she protested. Natalie needs more support. You've always been stronger. More capable family. Helps family. That's what we taught you. This isn't helping Mom. This is taking advantage. You should see how happy Natalie is. She continued, ignoring my point. She's been posting how much fun she's having for the first time in months. She's smiling again. Don't you want your sister to be happy? The implication was clear. If I insisted they return the money, I would be responsible for Natalie's unhappiness. It was emotional blackmail. Pure and simple. "You need to come home immediately," I said firmly. "We need to discuss repayment arrangements in person. We can't cut our trip short," my mother replied, sounding shocked at the suggestion. "We've already planned everything. We'll talk when we get back next week." Next week, they intended to continue their vacation for several more days, presumably charging more expenses to my card. The conversation ended with no resolution, only more frustration that afternoon fresh. Charges appeared on my account: a helicopter tour of Paris, $3,500, another shopping spree at Dior for $200, and lunch at Louis Verne in the Eiffel Tower, $950. Meanwhile, Natalie's Instagram continued to document their extravagance with a recent post captioned, "Some people think money is more important than family healing." The passive-aggressive jab was clearly directed at me. She was publicly painting me as the villain for objecting to their unauthorized use of my credit card. The unfairness of it burned at work. My distraction had become noticeable. My boss pulled me aside after a meeting where I misrepresented some key figures. "Laura, this isn't like you. Is everything all right?" I gave her a vague explanation about family issues, promising to get back on track. Soon she was understanding but concerned, reminding me that our client presentation had been rescheduled for the following week and needed my full attention. The pressure was mounting from all sides: my family's continued exploitation, their refusal to acknowledge the seriousness of their actions, my professional responsibilities suffering from the distraction, and the growing financial impact, as new charges appeared daily. Thursday brought another complication. My Aunt Sophia called, clearly having been recruited by my parents to intervene. "Laura, your parents told me about your little disagreement," she began. "Why are you making such a big deal about this? They've done so much for you and Sophia. They took my credit card information without permission and charged over $56,000 for a luxury vacation. That's not a little disagreement. It's theft." "Such harsh words for family," she chided. "They're just trying to give Natalie something special after her heartbreak. You know how fragile she is." The conversation left me feeling even more isolated. It seemed my entire family had united against me, dismissing my legitimate concerns and casting me as selfish for wanting control over my own finances. Later that day, I discovered they had extended their trip by 3 additional days, upgrading their hotel suite in the process. The new charges included a spa day for all 3 of them, totaling over $2,000. It was as if they were deliberately pushing to see how far they could go, how much they could take, before I finally snapped. The breaking point was approaching. Rapidly Thursday evening, I invited Jasmine over to discuss my options. As we sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the growing list of charges, she outlined my choices with brutal clarity. "You have 3 options," she explained. 1, you can let this continue and accept the charges, essentially giving them a free vacation. 2, you can report this as fraud to the credit card company and potentially press charges, which would have serious legal consequences for your parents and sister. Or 3, you can freeze the card to prevent further charges while you figure out how to handle repayment. What exactly would happen if I reported this as fraud? I asked the credit card company would investigate. Given the evidence, they would likely pursue criminal charges for credit card fraud. Your parents and sister could face fines or even jail time depending on how the prosecutor decides to handle it. The thought of my parents in legal trouble made my stomach churn despite their betrayal. Jasmine sensed my hesitation. "No, it's difficult," she said gently. "But consider this. If a stranger had stolen your card information and charged $56,000, what would you do?" "I'd report it immediately," I answered without hesitation. Why should family get away with something a stranger couldn't? Her question hung in the air between us. Why indeed? Because I love them. Because we shared blood. Did that give them the right to exploit me after Jasmine left? I called the credit card company again to discuss my options. The representative confirmed that I could freeze the card immediately, which would prevent any new charges while leaving the account active. This would give me time to decide on next steps without accumulating additional debt. This won't affect any pending charges that have already been authorized, she warned, but it will block any new attempts to use the card. I thanked her and hung up, still uncertain. Freezing the card would send a clear message, but it would also strand my family in Paris. They would be furious, and the relationship damage might be irreparable, but letting them continue their spending spree would drain my savings and reinforce their belief that they could take advantage of me without consequences. I paced my apartment, weighing the options. The financial impact of their actions was significant. The $56,000 already charged would deplete most of my emergency fund. I'd been saving for a down payment on a larger apartment, planning to rent out my current place for additional income. Those plans would now be delayed by at least a year beyond the money. Though was the breach of trust, they had taken my card information without permission, made extravagant purchases they knew they couldn't afford, and then dismissed my concerns when confronted. If I didn't establish boundaries now, what would stop them from doing this again? I remembered my therapist's words from months earlier, when I discussed my family's habit of asking for loans. Enabling harmful behavior isn't kindness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary at my kitchen table. Late that night, I spread out childhood photos alongside my financial statements in one image. I stood proudly beside my father after winning a mathematics competition in 8th grade. In another, my mother hugged me at college graduation. Then there was Natalie's high school graduation, where my parents had presented her with a car they couldn't afford, while I'd received a gift card for my achievements. The pattern was clear throughout our lives. Natalie had been indulged while I was expected to fend for myself, and now as adults they were continuing the same dynamic. Taking from me to give to her with shaking hands, I logged into my credit card account. The option to freeze the card was prominently displayed on the account management page. I moved the cursor over the button, hesitated, then clicked. A confirmation dialog appeared. Are you sure you want to freeze your card? This will prevent any new charges until you unfreeze it. I took a deep breath and clicked confirm. The screen refreshed, displaying a message that my card had been successfully frozen. No new charges would be approved. A wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, anxiety, guilt, and underneath it all, a quiet sense of empowerment. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had set a firm boundary with my family. Whatever happened next, I had taken back control of my finances, and by extension, my relationship with them. My phone rang shortly after. It was Rebecca, calling to check on me as she did. Every few days I froze the card. I told her, my voice steadier than I expected. Good for you. She replied without hesitation. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, guilty, strong, all of it at once. That sounds about right, she said with a small laugh. The guilt will fade, but the strength will grow. You did the right thing, Laura. After we hung up, I prepared responses for the inevitable fallout I knew my family would call once they discovered the card was declined, and I wanted to be ready with clear, firm statements. I rehearsed what I would say, focusing on the facts rather than emotions. Despite my preparation, sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, imagining their reactions, second-guessing my decision, then reaffirming it by morning. Exhaustion had settled into my bones, but my resolve remained intact. I rose early and began my morning meditation, focusing on mantras of strength and self-respect. Whatever storm was coming, I would weather it. I had done nothing wrong by protecting myself from further exploitation. That knowledge would be my anchor. In the difficult days ahead, the first call came at 5:30 a.m. Friday morning, which was evening in Paris. My father's name flashed on my phone screen, and I took a deep breath before answering. What have you done? He demanded without preamble, his voice tight with anger. The card was just declined at dinner. I froze the account, I replied, my voice calmed, despite my racing heart. No new charges will be approved. Unfreeze it immediately, he ordered. We're in the middle of our vacation. A vacation you charged to my card without permission. I'm not unfreezing it. Laura, this is spiteful and cruel. We're your family. Yes, you are. I agreed, which makes your actions even more hurtful. You took my card information without asking, charged tens of thousands of dollars without my consent, and ignored my attempts to discuss it for days. Those aren't the actions of loving family members. So you're just going to strand us in Paris? His voice rose, indignation clear in every syllable. What kind of daughter does that? The kind who's tired of being taken advantage of. You have your own credit cards, use them. Our cards are maxed out. You know that. And there it was. The admission that they had planned this, knowing they couldn't pay for it themselves. They had deliberately put the burden on me, assuming I would bear it without complaint. That's not my problem, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. You should have considered that before booking a luxury vacation. You couldn't afford. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my father threatening that I was no longer part of this family if I didn't immediately unfreeze the card. I remained steadfast, ending the call when his threats became repetitive. My mother called next, her approach predictably different where my father had been angry. She was tearful. Do you know how humiliating it was? She sobbed. Standing there at that beautiful restaurant while the waiter said our card was declined. Everyone was staring at us. "I'm sorry you were embarrassed," I replied, genuinely, meaning it. Public humiliation wasn't my intent, but this situation is the result of choices you made. Not me. We're your parents. Laura, after everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? Mom, I put myself through college. I've been financially independent since graduation. I've given you and Dad and Natalie thousands of dollars over the years, none of which has ever been repaid. Her sobs intensified. How can you be so cold, so calculating? This isn't how we raised you. No, you raised me to be responsible and independent. I'm simply expecting the same from you. After my mother, Natalie's texts began flooding in. Unlike our parents, who at least attempted to justify their actions, Natalie went straight to personal attacks. You selfish? You've always been jealous of me, and now you're ruining the one good thing that's happened to me all year. Must be nice, sitting in your perfect apartment with your perfect job while making the rest of us miserable. Everyone's going to know what a heartless person you really are. I didn't respond to her texts knowing it would only fuel her anger. Instead, I muted notifications from her number and focused on preparing for work. The emotional toll was exhausting, but I was determined not to let their actions derail my professional responsibilities as well. By midday, social media became another battleground. Natalie had posted a tearful Instagram story claiming she was stranded in Paris because my sister decided to cut us off. Without warning, she shared screenshots of our text conversations carefully edited to remove context and make me appear unreasonable. Several mutual friends and extended family members saw the posts and began calling or messaging me, asking what was happening. Some were sympathetic once they heard the full story, while others sided with my family, suggesting I should be the bigger person and resolve the situation. My cousin Taylor called confusion in her voice. Natalie is saying, "You abandoned them in Paris out of spite. That doesn't sound like you." I explained the situation truthfully, including the unauthorized charges and my attempts to address the issue before freezing the card. "That's so different from what they're saying," Taylor remarked. "They're making it sound like you agreed to pay for the trip and then change your mind halfway through. That's not remotely what happened," I assured her. "They took my card information without permission and charged over $56,000 without asking. That's theft," she said slowly, realization dawning. "Why aren't you pressing charges because they're family?" I replied simply. The irony not lost on me. The very reason they felt entitled to take advantage of me was also what prevented me from pursuing legal action against them. Saturday brought a new crisis. My parents called to inform me that they couldn't pay the remaining hotel bill, which had reached nearly $15,000 with their room service charges and extended stay. "The hotel is threatening to call the police if we don't pay," my father said, his earlier anger replaced by panic. "You need to call them and authorize payment." "No, I don't," I replied firmly. "This is a situation you created. Then what are we supposed to do? We're stranded." I suggested they contact the American embassy, which could provide emergency assistance to citizens abroad. I also reminded them that they could reach out to friends or other family members for help, just as they had done with me countless times before. "No one else can afford to help us," my mother protested. "Neither could I." I pointed out the difference is, you didn't give me a choice later that day. Natalie escalated her social media campaign. She posted a public Instagram story that began with her crying into the camera, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "I never thought my own sister would abandon us in a foreign country," she sobbed. "Laura has always resented me because our parents loved me more. Now she's getting her revenge by freezing the card she promised we could use for this trip." The blatant lies stunned me. I had never promised they could use my card. They had taken the information without my knowledge, much less my consent. But Natalie's followers wouldn't know that, and judging by the supportive comments, many believed her version of events. Several of my colleagues saw Natalie's posts creating an awkward situation at work. My boss pulled me aside on Friday afternoon, concern evident in her expression. "Laura, is everything all right? There are some concerning posts circulating about you." I gave her a brief professional explanation of the situation, emphasizing that I was handling it, and it wouldn't affect my work performance. She seemed satisfied but advised me to consider speaking with HR if the situation impacted my workplace environment throughout this public drama. I received unexpected support from friends who saw through the manipulation. Rebecca sent flowers to my office with a note reading, Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Jasmine invited me to dinner Saturday night, providing a much-needed respite from the constant stress. Despite this support, the emotional impact was severe. I experienced anxiety attacks several times, my chest tightening until breathing became difficult. Sleep remained elusive, and when I did manage to drift off, nightmares jolted me awake. The physical symptoms of stress, accumulated headaches, fatigue, loss of appetite. By Saturday afternoon, I called my therapist for an emergency session over video chat. She helped me process the overwhelming emotions and reinforce that setting boundaries, even painful ones, was not only appropriate, but necessary. What you're experiencing is the backfire effect, she explained, when you change a long-established dynamic. Those who benefited from the old arrangement will resist fiercely. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're disrupting a system that worked for them at your expense. Her words helped me prepare for the inevitable in-person confrontation. When my family returned, they would be angry, hurt, and defensive. They would try every manipulation technique that had worked in the past. My challenge would be remaining firm in my boundaries while managing my own emotional responses. Sunday brought news that my parents had used an emergency credit card they kept for dire situations to book economy flights home. They would arrive Monday afternoon. The reckoning was approaching, and I needed to be ready. Sunday became preparation day. I cleared my schedule for Monday afternoon and evening, knowing the confrontation would require my full attention and energy. I organized financial evidence printouts of every unauthorized charge, a timeline of events, and a summary of the total financial impact on my savings and future plans. I also prepared my apartment, clearing the dining table for our discussion and ensuring the space felt neutral and calm. The physical preparations helped channel my anxiety into productive action. My support system stood ready. Rebecca promised to call at specific intervals to check on me while Jasmine would remain on standby in case I needed immediate assistance. My therapist had provided strategies for maintaining emotional boundaries during difficult conversations. Mentally, I rehearsed key points I needed to communicate. This wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about accountability and future expectations. I practiced breathing exercises to stay centered and prepare responses to likely manipulation attempts. Monday morning, I went to work early to complete urgent tasks before taking the afternoon off by noon. I was back home, changing into comfortable clothes and setting up water and simple snacks on the table. The financial documents were arranged neatly beside 3 copies of a repayment agreement I had drafted with guidance from a legal consultant at 2:17 p.m. The doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find my parents and Natalie standing there looking tired and disheveled from their journey. My father's expression was thunderous, my mother's tearful, and Natalie sullen. Without waiting for an invitation, they pushed past me into the apartment. "I hope you're satisfied," my father began immediately. "You've ruined what should have been a beautiful family vacation." "A vacation charged to my credit card without my permission," I reminded him calmly. "Please sit down. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," Natalie snapped. "You've made your feelings perfectly clear." "Actually, I haven't," I replied. "That's why we're having this conversation now. Please sit." Reluctantly, they took seats at the dining table. I remained standing, gathering my thoughts before beginning with the statement I had prepared. "What happened over the past week represents a serious breach of trust," I began. "You took my credit card information without permission and charged over $56,000 for a luxury vacation without my knowledge or consent. When I discovered the charges and tried to contact you, you ignored me for days when I finally reached you. You dismissed my concerns and continued spending. These actions have damaged our relationship in ways that will take time to repair." My father attempted to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "Please let me finish. I've listened to your perspective for days now. It's my turn to speak." I presented the evidence methodically. The original charges, the additional expenses, after I had asked them to stop the total amount, and the impact on my financial security. Outlined the history of previous loans that had never been repaid, totaling over $15,000 in the past 3 years. A loan weighted constitutes credit card fraud. I explained legally, I could report this to the authorities, which could result in criminal charges. I don't want to do that, but I need you to understand the seriousness of your actions. My father's face reddened. "Are you threatening us? Your own family?" "I'm stating facts," I corrected him, "and offering a solution that doesn't involve legal consequences." I placed the repayment agreement in front of each of them. This outlines a payment plan to reimburse the full amount. Over the next 3 years, it also establishes clear boundaries for our financial relationship moving forward. My mother pushed the paper away without reading it. We can't possibly pay this much monthly. We don't have the money. You have the money to spend it? I pointed out. You need to find the money to repay it. This is ridiculous. Natalie interjected. You're acting like we're criminals taking someone's credit card information without permission and charging $56,000 is criminal behavior. I replied evenly. The fact that we're family doesn't change that. The conversation continued in circles with my family, alternating between anger dismissal and emotional manipulation. My father attempted to dominate the discussion through volume and intimidation tactics that had worked in the past. This time, I remained calm and redirected the conversation back to the central issues each time they tried to derail it after nearly an hour of heated discussion. A subtle shift occurred. My mother, who had been watching me carefully, seemed to register something new in my demeanor. You're really serious about this, aren't you? She asked quietly. Yes, I am, I confirmed. This isn't going away, and I'm not backing down. My father, sensing the change in momentum, switched tactics. What happens if we don't sign this agreement? Are you really going to take legal action against your own parents? The question hung in the air between us. It was the moment of truth for them. And for me, would I follow through or would I cave as I had so many times before? Yes, I said simply. If necessary, I will. I hope it doesn't come to that. The silence that followed was profound. For perhaps the first time they were seeing me, not as compliant, reliable Laura, who would always put their needs first, but as an adult with boundaries, who was prepared to enforce them. Natalie was the first to break. I can sell the clothes and bags I bought. She offered, her voice small. They're still new with tags. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was a start, a recognition that actions have consequences, and that she had some responsibility in making amends. My father still resisted, but my mother reached for the agreement and began reading it carefully. The monthly payment is too high, she said. We can't manage this amount. Then let's discuss what you can manage, I replied, opening the door to negotiation while maintaining the core requirement they would repay the debt over the next 2 hours. We hammered out terms that were challenging but feasible. My parents surrendered the jewelry they had purchased in Paris as partial repayment. Natalie agreed to sell the luxury items from the trip and contribute the proceeds immediately. The remaining balance would be paid in monthly installments over 4 years instead of 3, with the possibility of adjusting the timeline if their financial situation improved. The most difficult term for them to accept was my requirement that we attend family counseling sessions. We don't need therapy. My father insisted we need to put this behind us and move on. This situation didn't happen in isolation. I explained, it's the result of long-standing patterns in our relationship. If we don't address those patterns, we'll end up right back here. Eventually, they agreed to 6 sessions with the possibility of continuing, if beneficial. It was a compromise, but one I could accept as a starting point. By the time they left my apartment that evening, we had signed a revised agreement and scheduled our first counseling appointment. The atmosphere remained tense, but beneath the discomfort, I sensed a fundamental shift. For the first time in our relationship, I had established a boundary and held firm, despite their resistance. Whatever came next, that change was significant and irreversible. As I closed the door behind them, exhaustion washed over me. The confrontation had been every bit as difficult as anticipated, but I had remained true to myself throughout that. Alone felt like victory. 3 months passed, bringing gradual changes to our family dynamic. The first repayment installments arrived on time, transferred directly to my account as agreed. While the amount was modest compared to the total debt, the consistency represented a step toward accountability. Our family therapy sessions revealed deeper issues than I had anticipated, under the guidance of Dr. Bennett, a family therapist specializing in financial conflicts. We began exploring the patterns that had led to the Paris incident. My parents reluctantly acknowledged their history of favoritism toward Natalie, though they framed it as responding to different needs rather than preferential treatment. Laura always seemed so self-sufficient. My mother explained during our 3rd session, Natalie needed more support. Did you ever consider that I appeared self-sufficient because I had no other choice? I asked that I learned early on that asking for help wasn't an option for me. These conversations were painful, but necessary, bringing to light assumptions and expectations that had shaped our relationships for decades. Progress was slow and inconsistent with breakthroughs followed by setbacks, but the overall trajectory was positive. Meanwhile, I implemented new financial safeguards to prevent future exploitation. I froze my credit with all 3 major bureaus, set up alerts for any new account openings, and changed all my passwords and security. Questions: I created a separate account specifically for family emergencies, with strict guidelines for its use and a limited balance that wouldn't devastate me. If depleted at work, my focus returned, and with it, my performance improved. The client presentation that had suffered during the crisis was rescheduled and executed flawlessly, resulting in a multi-year contract. My boss noted the change, commenting that I seemed more confident, somehow, more assertive. She was right. Standing up to my family had strengthened muscles I hadn't known I possessed. The experience of setting boundaries and holding firm, despite emotional pressure, had transferred to other areas of my life. In meetings, I spoke up more readily with clients. I negotiated more effectively. The woman who had always put others first was learning to advocate for herself. Natalie showed small but significant signs of growth. She found part-time work at a marketing agency, providing some stability to her previously erratic income. She began tracking her expenses in a budgeting app. One recommended occasionally texting me with questions about financial management. These changes weren't dramatic transformations, but they represented movement in a healthier direction. My parents struggled more with the new dynamic. Years of established patterns don't change easily, and they often slipped into old habits of expectation and entitlement. During our 5th therapy session, my father admitted, "It's hard to see Laura differently. She's always been our rock, the one who could handle anything that's a heavy burden to place on a child." Dr. Bennett observed, and an unfair one to maintain with an adult. My relationship with extended family evolved as well. Some relatives, like my cousin Taylor, gained new respect for me after hearing the full story. Others, particularly those who had benefited from similar dynamics in their own relationships, distanced themselves. I found I didn't miss their presence as much as I had expected. In their place, my friendships deepened. Rebecca, Jasmine, and other friends who had supported me through the crisis became a chosen family of sorts. Our connections, based on mutual respect and reciprocity, provided the emotional support I had always sought from my biological family. Perhaps most surprisingly, I began dating again after a 2-year hiatus, focused on career advancement. I met Daniel, a software engineer, at a friend's dinner party. Unlike previous relationships where I had fallen into a caretaker role, this connection felt balanced from the beginning. When I eventually shared the Paris story with him, his response was refreshingly straightforward. They were wrong, and you were brave to stand up to them. The ongoing healing process wasn't linear. Some days brought progress, while others triggered old patterns and pain. I continued individual therapy alongside our family sessions, working through the childhood experiences that had shaped my people-pleasing tendencies and need for approval. Gradually, I learned to expect respect rather than seek approval. I became more attuned to the subtle signs of manipulation and developed healthier responses. The guilt that had initially accompanied my boundary setting diminished, replaced by a quiet confidence in my right to protect myself. The financial aspect of recovery proceeded according to plan. By the 3-month mark, approximately $12,000 had been repaid through the sale of luxury items and monthly installments. The debt remained substantial, but the consistent repayment represented an important shift in accountability. Looking back on the entire experience, several critical lessons emerged with clarity. Love without respect isn't really love. For years, I had accepted a family dynamic that demanded my support, while disregarding my boundaries. True love includes respect for autonomy and limitations. Setting boundaries is an act of self-care, not cruelty. By allowing my family to exploit my resources, I had enabled behavior that was ultimately harmful to all of us. Drawing the line wasn't punitive. It was necessary for healthier relationships. Financial independence includes protecting your resources. My success meant little if I couldn't defend it from exploitation. Learning to say no to financial demands was as important as earning the money in the first place. Family healing requires honesty. Not enabling our therapy sessions were uncomfortable, but essential, bringing to light patterns that had remained unexamined for decades. Without that honesty, no genuine healing could occur. The hardest conversations are often the most necessary. Confronting my family about their betrayal was excruciating, but it opened the door to a more authentic relationship. Avoiding difficult conversations only preserves dysfunctional patterns. This journey isn't complete. 3 months represents only the beginning of what will likely be years of adjustment and growth. Some days, I still doubt myself, questioning whether I was too harsh or not firm enough. But beneath those occasional doubts lies a newfound confidence in my worth and my right to set boundaries. I'm proud of the strength I discovered through this ordeal. Standing firm against lifelong patterns of exploitation wasn't easy, but it was necessary not just for my financial health, but for my emotional well-being and the long-term health of our family relationships. I hold hope for authentic connections built on mutual respect, both within my family and beyond it. The path forward may not be smooth, but it's leading towards something more genuine than what came before. If there's one final wisdom would share, it's this: measure love by actions, not words. Anyone can claim to love you, but true love manifests in respect for your boundaries, consideration for your well-being, and accountability. When harm occurs, accept nothing less from family or anyone else. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? What helped you stay strong when they pushed back? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Remember that protecting your boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for healthy relationships. Thank you for listening, and I hope my journey helps you navigate your own path with courage and self-respect.